Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining today to learn about escrow. So we know everybody's busy, and we appreciate everybody taking the time away from their busy schedule to talk to us today about escrow and what it means, what secure escrow means in light of some of the events we've seen recently. Our goal for today is to explain what secure escrow is and explain what clients should look for when selecting an escrow provider, in addition to walk through our security measures at SeedTrust. We hope that this informs clients to be better prepared when selecting an escrow provider, have peace of mind knowing that when working with SeedTrust that they are secure, and in addition, lay a roadmap for anybody and any competitor of the things they should put in place if they're going to run an escrow company. Honestly, issues with escrow and issues with escrow providers are completely avoidable, and we cannot stand for this as an industry to have people taken advantage of or people hurt. The broader process of surrogacy is so beautiful, and there's so many people involved in our industry that care, and surrogates and donors and everybody working to help families grow. So I'll tell you, I get upset, a little bit choked up when things happen, when there's issues in escrow, because it is our purpose to educate the market and provide secure escrow. So again, the spirit of today is education and transparency. And we want to help eliminate the risk of unsecure escrow providers in our industry ever again. Here with me today, I have Kara, our marketing director, who's quickly become an expert on streaming tools and how to do this. Because honestly, usually at SeedTrust, we just put our head down and focus on our work and do a good job. We don't do a lot of streaming and webinars. And Kara's newer to the team, to the industry. So thank you, Kara. And also putting together the deck that's going to serve as a guide today. And also Abby, who's our Director of Partner Relations, will be my co-host today. So we're excited to host you. We're excited to talk about this fun and timely topic of escrow. And we have a lot to cover. So we're going to jump right in. So again, for those of you who don't know us, we're SeedTrust. I'm the president of SeedTrust. And today we're going to go through all these elements I mentioned. This stuff is dense, and most people don't think about escrow every day. They don't think about the checks and balances and bonding and everything associated with running an escrow company. I'm going to go through it in great detail. As you have questions, send them to Caitlin Oberly from our team. Caitlin's going to gather those questions and send them over to Abby, and we're going to do our absolute best to answer as many as we can. This is recorded. We will send this presentation out as a follow-up and try to post it everywhere we can, so you can share it with others and it can be available. We will also send out a detailed Q&A as a follow-up to our discussion today. Just a little bit on SeedTrust. Again, today we're focused on security. Bigger picture, SeedTrust was established years ago because we saw the need in the industry for secure escrow that protected everybody and guided everybody in the financial matters. When we entered, people were still sending checks in the mail. There was no such thing as scheduled payments. There was no such thing as technology that created transparency or even a large bonding and insurance package. We've innovated that because this industry deserves secure escrow that not only holds the money securely, but administers it throughout the process in a way that is transparent and efficient, so people cannot focus on the money more than they have to, but rather focus on the beautiful journey they're on to have a family. By doing that and by constantly pushing the envelope of advancing technology and advancing security and advancing our service offering and what it means to be a great escrow provider, SeedTrust has become the market leader. We've had the privilege, and we're humbled to have served over 20,000 families successfully. So when I tell you we take the responsibility of securely managing escrow and protecting client funds and being a good administrator of the funds throughout, seriously, this is our passion. This is what we do. This is why we exist. So when these things happen, when there's issues in escrow in the market, we feel like it's our responsibility to educate. So the topic we're going to cover today is focused on security. But for those who are maybe less close to the industry or earlier in their journey, let me start off with what is escrow. So escrow in art or in surrogacy and egg donation is very different than any other instance of escrow that at least I can think of. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is we're integral in not just holding the money for a transaction or the purchase of real estate, but we're integral in holding the money between all the parties. And take a surrogacy journey, for example. There's over 8 vendors. There's a surrogate and an intended parent involved, or an intended parents, and everybody's going on a multi-year journey, and a beautiful one, to have a family. Throughout that entire journey, there's payments, all administered in accordance to the contract. The escrow provider's job is to hold the money in a neutral way and administer the funds thoughtfully and timely in accordance to the underlying agreement. And by way of a surrogacy journey, that can be 100+ payments over 2 years. So having the right provider that is secure, first of all, is important. Also, one that can do it thoughtfully and do it correctly without mistakes and timely, so there's not undue financial tension, is extremely important. So today we're going to talk about one element of selecting an escrow provider, and arguably one of the most important elements because it touches on the others naturally. So when selecting an escrow provider, first and foremost, you want to make sure they're secure and to manage the money throughout the entire process, not just by way of keeping it secure, but also managing it correctly into the dollar and by way of exactly aligning it to the contract. But there's other elements. You want to make sure that they're experts, that they are there to guide you, that they have good customer service, and so forth. But today we're going to really focus on security. And again, we're going to talk about what we think should be the minimum requirements or what people should think about when selecting an escrow company. And then we're also going to be fully transparent about what SeedTrust has in place to protect our clients. So what does it mean? And just to qualify something as I jump into these topics, I stand here today with you representing SeedTrust. And so SeedTrust opinion, in my opinion, as the president of SeedTrust. There are other opinions on this topic. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the prior president and a board member of the Society for Ethics and Surrogacy and Egg Donation, also known as SEEDS. I am not representing the perspective of SEEDS today. I hope that some of the information I can provide, some of the guidance will help SEEDS work with SEEDS to help guide them creating a standard as SEEDS moves into creating more standards and figuring out governance so we don't have these type of issues. But just to be clear, today I'm representing Adam's opinion and SeedTrust's perspective on the topic. And again, my intent is to educate and create transparency around our business. So without further ado, here's the core topics we're going to talk about today. Again, this stuff can be thick, but it is extremely important that any company managing money, any financial institution or any escrow company has these core elements in place. So a qualified and experienced leadership team and staff. If they don't have the proper credentials and the proper experience, then they should not be trusted. A very defined structure process, and systems around everything they do. This creates checks and balances, allows for humans checking other humans, to eliminate risk and risk of bad actors, and also to catch mistakes. Absolutely critical. We think it's important that an escrow company needs to be independent, so they're neutral, and also specialized, so they're actually qualified not only to manage an escrow case, but to manage an escrow company thoughtfully and well, because it's important. We think it's important for an escrow company to be bonded and to have a meaningful insurance package. Without this, we don't think someone should work with an escrow company. And we're going to get into all this in detail. And lastly, audits and oversight. Extremely important that there's internal and external audits and oversight on a financial company. So again, we're going to dive into each of these, but keep sending your questions in. And bear with me because I know this stuff can be thick, and feel free to ask me to explain something in more detail or in different terms. I wake up thinking about this topic and these things every day. I'm obsessed with them. I know most people aren't. So please feel free to jump in and ask questions by sending them to Caitlin. All right, so my phone's going to ring. This is the benefit of being live. And while we're on that topic, if my kids run in, if they figure out how to block the door, I am working from home today, so that could happen. They are adorable, but probably wouldn't be able to speak on this topic very well. So let's start with qualified and experienced leadership and staff. So it is our opinion that for somebody to manage others' funds, they should have these elements in place. They should have a full-time licensed attorney and a CPA. The attorney provides the legal know-how to look at the contracts when we're scheduling payments or making decisions if something is in the contract that should be paid. And also, the CPA provides the financial know-how of setting up accounts, checks and balances, the accounting that's absolutely necessary and critical for an escrow company. We think you need both of these elements. The other benefit to having them is they're qualified to jump in and have they both have the fiduciary responsibility around their licenses to do it. In addition, we think the broader team should have backgrounds in business, law, finance, accounting, and banking, because it takes all of those areas of expertise to effectively manage escrow. In addition, what we do in servicing egg donation escrow is very unique and very complex and very involved. So it's extremely important that the escrow company is experienced in servicing egg donation escrow. And we'll dive into that more. Abby, did any questions come in so far?
Well, that was going to kind of take into my next question is, why is industry experience important for professionals managing services rather than just a general financial or legal experts?
Yeah, look, within servicing egg donation across all of the professions, the lawyers, the agencies, the doctors, insurance, everybody needs to be experts in what they do, just because it's so nuanced. And especially when managing escrow, you need the expertise for two reasons. One, the individual governance of a case throughout the journey, to look at the contracts, to look at the decisions. And that's often thought of because people are going to say, well, are these folks or is this team of people qualified to manage my escrow? They also need to think about, is that team of people qualified to run a financial company? Do they have the right team in place and the right structure in place? And are they qualified to manage an escrow company as the leadership team and operational team? That's why we think expertise is important, and both by way of backgrounds and education and licenses, but also by way of specific experience within the industry. So to talk a little bit about SeedTrust. At SeedTrust, we're founded by a CPA and an attorney, and we're led by an MBA and former bank executive. I often like to say I'm like a recovering banker, right? But the knowledge that we collectively have as the ownership team and leadership team is meaningful and needed. In addition, we have a large team of over 50 professionals that is highly committed and passionate about our purpose of delivering risk-free, secure escrow and reducing the financial stress and surrogacy by doing that really well. Among that team of professionals, we have 3 attorneys, 2 CPAs, multiple MBAs, and all of them wake up every day obsessed with escrow and doing a good job. And I couldn't be more proud of the team we have in place serving our clients every day. They're extremely passionate and hardworking. And again, you have to have a team that has the legal and business expertise, and we have both in spades. And our expertise has really come from managing a lot of journeys. Over the years, we've probably seen it all, good and bad, and things that come up in cases as it pertains to escrow. We're not the attorneys, we're not the agencies, we rely on them, and they're absolutely necessary and needed. Our expertise is on the escrow and on the financial matters associated with journeys, and we take that role very seriously, and we're available with that expertise and background to guide our clients. The next topic we're going to discuss is going to be the structure, process, and systems associated with an escrow company. So again, we started off with the team needs to be qualified and focused. Secondly, you have to have, any financial company must have the proper structure with checks and balances, the proper processes, and governed by systems that create transparency. And then for an escrow company, especially, the proper bank level security and structure. So if these things are not in place, the risk of working with an escrow company is too high. So for example, with structure, you need checks and balances. So the team is checking the team for mistakes or for errors. Also, that not one person or 2 people could take money or make a mistake, that there's the proper checks and balances to ensure that a bad actor or a couple bad actors collaborating couldn't misappropriate or take funds. If you can have checks and balances, but if an escrow company does not have thoughtful processes and structures around everything they do, then people can breach and go around the checks and balances. So then having defined processes and systems is going to control that to ensure nobody bypasses the checks and balances. It's also important that an escrow company has systems. We think the systems are valuable for 2 reasons. Completely necessary from an operational standpoint to control that people go through the proper process. Also, the systems create checks and balances because an escrow company should have an escrow system that's also audited by a separate escrow accounting system that's checking each other against the bank. So absolutely necessary. The other beauty of having a system is it doesn't allow people to bypass or go around. It keeps everybody defined and creates full transparency. So within a proper escrow system, clients should have access to every transaction in real time. Internally, we should be able to track everything any teammate does around any account at any moment. And then we need to have a separate system run by a separate accounting team that's checking our core system against the banks. Without that in place, the risk is too high of somebody breaching checks and balances or going around it. And bank level security is common knowledge for most businesses, but it's extremely important when it comes to an escrow company managing money. So we think an escrow company should have multiple banks in place, just in case there is a disruption at one bank. For whatever reason, there's a macro bank issue, or if there is an issue with an account with fraud, for example, like with the internal but an external fraud event where the account has to be frozen for a few days for a new account to be opened. An escrow company should have a secondary account where they can continue to operate to ensure payments aren't disrupted. In addition, it's absolutely critical that an escrow company has every security measure a bank can offer. They need to have the dual controls, multi-factor approvals, in addition, all the fraud protection, like a solution commonly known as positive pay, to ensure that every transaction going in and out of those bank accounts completely secure and approved. Abby?
Hey, Adam, can you explain what procedures and protocols are in place to detect errors and how these things can be caught ahead of time? I know you talked about checks and balances, but could you maybe just go a little bit thorough into that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to jump to the next slide here. So big picture, an escrow company should have all of those elements. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have put in place at SeedTrust and the SeedTrust way to make sure our clients are secure. So at SeedTrust, we have a very thoughtful, structured processes and systems around everything we do. And we have thorough checks and balances every step along the way and very rigorous processes. Sometimes we're losing efficiencies in terms of the amount of people touching a request and the amount of steps it has to go through. But what we're doing in that is we're assuring proper checks and balances, and we're assuring that we're catching errors as well. So at SeedTrust, you'll hear us talk a lot about our 5-step approval process. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit of detail here. So what that means is we have multiple teams and multiple different groups led by different managers to approve any single transaction. And what that does is it makes sure each team is checking each other, and that it has to be done thoughtfully before any money is moved. So let me just explain our process. So first, for us, an agency or a surrogate, typically, or an intended parent, has to submit a request through our system. Our team can't initiate a request. So all requests to move money or to approve a release that's not scheduled comes from an external party requesting it. Again, surrogate or agency, typically, or donor. So once that request comes in, it goes to what we call our legal operations team. This is a team of highly qualified professionals that look at the financial aspects of GSAs all day and compare that against the request, what we call a disbursement request that come in through our system. Again, they can never initiate a request. It has to be submitted by somebody else. That team is going to verify that request is A, in accordance to the contract, and B, has all of the needed documentation to ensure it should be approved. If it does not if it's not in accordance with the contract or not contemplated in the contract, they're going to seek the approvals or guide that it shouldn't be approved. In the event, they're also going to ensure it has the proper documentation. So we can not just see that it's included in the contract, but verify that the money was properly spent by way of receipts and so forth. So that's the first step. It gets submitted, and then our legal team of experts is going to check it, review it, and we take the responsibility to get that decision correct. And again, if there is questions around a decision, it goes back to the agency, the surrogate, and we get everybody aligned with approvals, and then we move forward. The next step in our process is going to go to our payment team. Our payment team checks every request, checks the case to make sure there's no duplicates, to make sure the proper amount of money is there, to double check what the legal team did to ensure that the transaction is correct and should in fact go out. If that payment team sees an issue with the request, they can't change it. They have to send it back to the legal team for them to resubmit it to them to fix the issue or get further clarification, and then resubmit it to the payment team. Once the payment team has done their job to check to make sure the payment is correct and should in fact go forward, they submit it to a banking team. That team is actually looking at the request to make sure the proper bank information is in there, that there's not duplicates again, and this is a separate team. The benefit of this flow is we've had an external submission in 3 different teams led by experts and with qualified teams of professionals checking this request. At that point, if there's a mistake, it has to go all the way back to the beginning of the process and go back through. And we do catch in the beginning of this process, we catch thousands that add up to millions over the years in mistakes. And we also catch things that our team didn't see or overlooked and send it back. After going through this very vigorous review, it gets submitted to our bank. And at our bank, we have multiple submission and approvals, multi-factor approvals. So it takes lots of people to approve a file going out from the bank. Once money's released from the bank, and even beforehand, actually, within our system, everybody's notified. Then our audit team, which is a separate team led by a CPA, is doing daily bank reconciliations to check what happened at the bank and what's happening in the escrow system against what's within our accounting and software. So these softwares are effectively governing each other, and the audit team is checking the core team. So just big picture, why does this matter? Why in the world does having all of these different teams led by different professionals reporting up to different people matter? Well, because the reason it matters is because anybody, including myself as president of SeedTrust, cannot take the money. And in fact, it would take 4 to 5 people collaborating who work for different teams and different managers to collude against taking money from any one of our accounts, which is practically impossible. And listen, we have one of the most dedicated, hardworking, and passionate teams managing and supporting escrow. It would not happen. But an escrow company needs the proper systems and checks and balances in place to ensure if somebody does go wrong or choose to do something bad, they would get stopped or caught immediately. It's extremely important. Trust but verify, right? That process that I just went over in detail, we've defined it in different ways, and we'll certainly put out more information on it. That process, for it to be secure, has to be followed and has to be governed. One of the best ways to do that is within software. What do I mean by that? So SeedTrust has a custom software. When we looked at the industry 9 years ago, and we really started in the business with off-the-shelf software and then started building our custom software because we realized that this business is so involved and so unique and so nuanced. You needed custom software to create transparency and remove the tension, but also to create a secure internal process with checks and balances that could never be breached for security purposes. So SeedTrust holds the leading escrow software, which controls everything our team does. Every action our team takes on an escrow account happens within the software. That creates full transparency to intended parents, surrogates, agencies, and all the people watching. In addition, it ensures internally that we can map and check every step of every decision and every action any employee takes on a case. It's extremely important that that's in place because you can have as many steps or processes or checks and balances in place you want, but if there's not rigor around making sure that process is followed within systems that you can't go around, then they can be bypassed. It's not possible at SeedTrust. And lastly, bank security. We have a multi-bank system. We're integrated closely with banks. In addition, we use all of the available bank security possible, period. Hey, Abby.
Hi. So a couple questions here. First one is the money managed by SeedTrust held in IOLTA accounts or actual escrow accounts?
Yeah, so our money is held in attorney trust accounts or in escrow accounts. So they're governed and managed within our system, backed by our bond. We'll get into that in much more detail.
And then another question is, we've mentioned multi-banks, and can you elaborate on the importance of that and how that benefits clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I worked in banking for 10 years, I think slightly over 10 years at multiple levels as a lender, as had a strategy on the leadership team in all these different areas. But what I learned in those years is it's extreme that banks have disruption. There are fraud attacks on banks. There's things where banks could have a pause in service. And in a very unlikely case, we'll have like a Silicon Valley bank where the FDIC steps in and holds that bank for a few days and then transitions it to a secure bank and removes their license. These are very unlikely events, and we would not hold money at banks that we thought had that risk. But in that event, at a macro, what I would call like a macro bank issue, it'd be important for an escrow company to continue to operate and pay the money, especially as timely as what we do and surrogacy is and egg donation. Payments need to go out or there's a breach of contract. So in the event a bank has an issue, the escrow company should be able to seamlessly operate out of their other bank while that issue is being resolved at that bank. More at a micro level, if there is a fraud on like a bad check comes in, or there is a bad actor externally trying to attack the account, it would get caught if an escrow company had the proper systems in place, which we do. But there would be a hold on that account, and that account, it would take a day, if not two, to get a new account open, money flowing out of that account. So having multiple banks is really just an over security function to ensure there's not a disruption and also spread out the bank level risk. Good question. So another topic, and again, this is SeedTrust perspective. We think that an escrow company should be an independent third party. And what that means is that they don't have conflicts of interest and that they don't hold money and pay themselves for other services or have a greater allegiance to one client over the other. We think an escrow company should be extremely specialized in escrow management, so they're highly qualified to govern and manage the escrow. And why that matters is in escrow and in surrogacy journeys in particular, things usually go great. But every now and then there's more of a troubled case where there's disagreements or misunderstandings or disputes that come up. And in that event, we think the escrow company should be extremely qualified to guide on what's normal, how to navigate through this per the escrow agreement and the GSA, and be able to do that in an impartial way to provide objective advice. We find that when there is a misunderstanding or a frivolous claim of dispute, or one that's actually not a dispute, but just a misunderstanding, by way of expertise and independence and impartiality, we can talk to both sides, educate them on what's normal and what the contract says, or at least on the process to get the approvals or come to an agreement. And we're able to do that. Another reason it's extremely important for an escrow company to be independent is we should not have any ownership or control of other parties that we're paying. For example, agency held escrow is particularly problematic because they're bringing all the parties together. They are paying themselves their fee, and they're the ones primarily involved in keeping an eye on the escrow and the overall journey. So when they hold escrow, it's extremely problematic, and it's truly an unnecessary risk that should be avoided at all costs. That's one. And to be clear, both the conflict of interest when there's greater allegiance on one side and attorney held escrow is illegal or not permitted in some of the states that have very clear statutes. So having an impartial provider that is totally and fully objective and experienced to hold and manage the escrow and do it mutually with the fiduciary responsibility to both parties to govern it in accordance to the contract protects everybody involved, and to the parents, the surrogate, the donor, and all the vendors associated. Because when these conflicts of interest exist in escrow, it's an unacceptable risk to take. With SeedTrust, we are an independent third party. We don't have any ownership in the agency, law firm, clinic, and we don't represent any clients legally. Our sole responsibility is governed by our escrow agreement, by our fiduciary responsibility to manage the money in accordance to the contracts and the underlying agreements. And in the event that the situation is not contemplated in the contracts, or there is a dispute or a misunderstanding, our job is to guide through that process. We're experts in escrow management. That's what we do at SeedTrust. It's our sole focus. We do it well. We do it the best, and we're constantly innovating what that means, and pushing the market forward to manage escrow better and more securely. And again, we are neutral and objective. We're going to give the advice to protect our company and all clients, and we're going to make the decision of whether something should go out based on the contracts and the documentation. And being neutral allows us to provide the proper guidance and expert guidance at that, because we've been able to do it. We've been able to operate effectively across so many cases now. We've seen most things. And I don't want to imply in any way that the escrow company replaces the agency. It doesn't. What the agency does is critical, and it's absolutely necessary, and they deserve every award, and they should be celebrated, because what they do is extremely hard, and matching and guiding people through the journey. As it pertains to escrow, agencies have different setups and different levels of involvement. But at the base level, they are notified and they are tracking every dollar as well. And they also know the clients. They know their clients the best, which are also our clients, and it can be very good at helping explain issues, and also having us explain some of the technical, financial, and contractual items around the financial pieces, like lost wages, which we calculate all day, and things like that. In the event that there's not an agreement or there is a formal dispute, it's our job to bring in the attorneys to talk so they can come to an agreement. But the expert and neutral guidance is absolutely critical, and SeedTrust is in a great position to do that, and we take a lot of pride. So what I just spoke about leading into this next topic is how an escrow company should be set up operationally. So we think they should be experts. They should be qualified experts. They should have the proper structure and systems and bank security in place. We think that they should be independent and experts at escrow, because all that matters to ensure there's not mistakes, that the money is secure, and that they can provide the needed guidance. And they're qualified to do that to protect everybody involved. That's the starting point. But what happens when there's an issue with an escrow company? What's the backup plan? And that's when bonding and insurance comes into play. This is an area that is extremely misunderstood in our industry. And candidly, it's just confusing. So I'm going to do my best to explain it. I'm not a licensed insurance agent, but I'm going to tell you what I think as an executive of an escrow company, what these things mean and what they mean to our clients, and why we invest so heavily in them. So to start, bonding and insurance. Let's forget about everything else at this point in the conversation. Right now, we're only going to talk about the bond. And there's a star on this slide for a reason, because the bond is the most important thing. The bond is what protects clients and clients' funds against theft or employee dishonesty. It's the only thing that protects clients and client funds against an owner or an employee misappropriating or stealing the money intentionally. Okay? So nothing else does. So everything else below that line, then the bond does not protect against theft. So do not let others confuse you, or don't look at an entire package and say, oh, they have general liability, the funds are protected up to blank. They're not. It's the bond that protects against theft. The bond is the most important, because most of the time we have issues with escrow. It is a bad actor, or an employee that didn't have the proper systems instruction systems, checks and balances in place to guard against them becoming a bad actor and taking money. That's where the bond comes into effect. It's important that an escrow company has a sizable bond. And we're going to talk more into that from an oversight standpoint. We think an escrow company should have a minimum bond of $10 million. In addition, on the bond, it should include both the employees and the owners, which are also employees typically, but also the owners, which does ratchet up the risk for the bonding company, but also protects clients. Errors in admission, or E&O, often, actually, let me just go back to the bond for a second. So bonding can be called a few different things. We call it our bond. The market generally calls it a bond. It can also be called a fidelity bond. It can be called an employee crime and dishonesty insurance policy. But what's important is that this is the policy. And it's like the one place that they just don't have a universal name like E&O or errors and omissions. But what's important is that's what it's protecting against. So call it the bond, fidelity bond, or employee theft and dishonesty policy. That's what protects funds against bad actors. Errors and omissions, that's the policy that is in place to protect the escrow company and their clients in the event of mistakes. So not theft, but let's just say we made a mistake. The escrow company put an extra zero on something, or somehow sent the money to the wrong account and couldn't recover it. And it was truly an error. That's when errors and omission kicks in to protect the company and the clients. This is important for an escrow company because a mistake could be meaningful. We think an escrow company should have a minimum of $1 million errors and omission policy. The reason is that's about 10 times the most anybody would generally hold in escrow. So if an escrow company made a mistake on 10 different accounts to the full degree of the account, which is highly unlikely, they could recover from that by way of filing a claim on their insurance. Next would be the cyber security, which cyber security insurance. That's important for two reasons. One, it does actually provide insurance in the event of a cyber attack. It also provides a cyber response team that are professionals that would come in to help a company navigate an attack. We think $1 million is where you get that team and what an escrow company should have in place. And lastly, any business should have general liability. What that, again, in layman's terms, what general liability does is it protects the business against property damage or bodily injury. But for a service company that's not seeing clients walk in the door, it doesn't protect them too much, but it doesn't protect their clients from theft or errors in terms of escrow funds. So don't confuse general liability as a policy that backs up the escrow money, because it does not, to my knowledge. So, hey, Abby, you got some questions?
Yeah. So first question is, will clients be able to view our professional liability insurance policy showing the actual amount that is covered and insured? Is that something that SeedTrust will provide to clients upon request?
Great question. So the answer is yes. SeedTrust has always sent out all of our full policies upon request. We've also recently added all of them into our escrow software, into general resources. So the coverage of the proof of insurance is in there, so people can see the entire insurance we have. In addition, they can see the full policies we have in place. And it is our advice that the agencies and clients should have these documents verified and on hand, especially in the event of an issue. It's necessary to have it in hand.
Thank you. Another question is, what prevents any of the owners at SeedTrust to go into a physical bank and withdraw funds from the accounts?
Yes, we've set up multiple controls at our banks to where it takes multiple parties to submit and approve a transaction with any escrow dollars. When it comes to our operating account, which is separate to our escrow, the SeedTrust actual operating account, which we pay our employees from and things like that separately, we can. That's the business operating account. When it comes to escrow accounts, everything is set up with dual controls and have to come through a certain process and system to where, look, I'm the president of the company. I don't have signer authority to remove money from our accounts. It has to go through a set process. It has to go through people that have that authority who are not conflicted in that way. So the answer is, even me as president and one of the owners of the company couldn't do it.
Thank you. And maybe can we kind of go back to the bond? I think, obviously that's just a loaded topic of discussion. And one of the questions here is, in the event of theft or misappropriation, how does that bond actually work? How would clients get their money back?
Yeah, so in the event of that, what would happen is there would be a claim on the bond. And that process is defined. You go to the insurance company, notify them, make a claim. Generally speaking, there then is going to be a criminal investigation, forensic accounting, and the insurance company or companies is going to determine what the issue was, what happened to the money, verify that it's theft. In that event, the money would be paid. Once they've gone through that process, the money would be returned to the escrow accounts and to the ultimate owners of the money.
So you talked about just a recommendation having a minimum bond in place as an escrow provider. Can you elaborate a little bit about that and how, in the event that an escrow company would fail, what would that minimum bond actually cover?
Yeah, so a bond's going to pay out up to the total amount of the bond. Is how it generally works. So again, policies are different. They should be reviewed, but generally speaking, the bond is going to cover up to the amount of the bond. So on our next slide here, let me add this back. On our next slide here, we'll talk about SeedTrust bond. SeedTrust was able to increase our bond earlier this year from 40 to 44, striving to get to 50. And we're very happy to announce, after working on it all year, starting at the end of last year, we've been able to increase our bond to $50 million, which is the industry leading bond. In the event of a major issue on SeedTrust, the bond would pay out the $50 million, which is important for a few reasons. One, that's going to put money back in the accounts. And SeedTrust, it's impossible that amount of money would be stolen. But in the event that it did, that money would be returned. It's also important, into the section we're going to get into in a minute, that these insurance companies that diligently underwrite us are comfortable backing us with a $50 million bond. So they've done background checks. They've reviewed us. They reviewed our process. They reviewed our teams. They reviewed our systems. And they said, listen, this is a company 8 insurance companies are underwriting collectively and saying they're comfortable with a $50 million risk that would pay out if there ever was an issue. We've been in business for 9 years, growing into the industry leader for the past 7, and we've had 0 claims on our bond. So if I could just, and again, since we're on our package, this is not typical. It's not typical for an escrow company to have this size of bond. It's not typical to have this big of a policy. SeedTrust, at our very core, nobody else has this. Nobody else said, hey, you need a $50 million bond. Nobody else pushed us into that. We just saw the ability to do it. We said the market deserves additional security. I wanted our processes thoroughly underwritten by experts, and we're willing to invest in it to protect our clients. So that's what matters. And the bond is what matters to protect everybody involved. Just real quick, we do have all the other insurances, the $1 million of errors and omissions, the cybersecurity, the general liability. And we have the most robust package that we think we need and that money can buy. Just so you know, at SeedTrust, our third largest expense is our bond. Employees, technology, bond. It's an extremely expensive investment. But we believe in investing in security because, again, we're a team of bankers, attorneys, we're covering bankers, attorneys, and CPAs that are going to be conservative and make sure our clients are protected so we can sleep at night and they can sleep at night.
Hey,
and this is where we're at today, and we will continue to push this envelope.
Thanks so much for explaining the different policies. Would you be able to just clarify what the general liability insurance covers?
Yeah. So again, I'm not a licensed insurance broker. I don't sell these policies. So I'm not giving insurance advice here to any business in any way. Generally speaking, from my perspective as an operator of the company, the general liability protects the business from property damage or bodily injury. So think about like slip and fall or a fire at the business office or something like that. That's when the general liability policy kicks in to protect the business. It's not necessarily there to protect client funds from theft or error. So I see that confused a lot when I talk to clients. I say, oh, well, they have general liability of $2 million. Yeah, that doesn't protect you. And just like FDIC insurance, every escrow company should ensure the funds are insured and exclusively at FDIC insured banks, because the FDIC regulations are strict and they control a bank when there is an issue. But that does not protect a client against an issue at an escrow company of theft or error. So just make sure that those things aren't confused with the surety bond, fidelity bond, employee theft policy, and so forth, because that's what protects. That common language is what protects the escrow funds. This next section I'm going to get into is extremely important as well. So we've talked about qualified, proper structure, systems, processes across all elements of the company, and we've talked about the fallback in the event that there is an issue. You also want to make sure that there's not likely of an issue, and that if there is, there's somebody to go to, and that they're also being monitored to be a reasonable risk. And that's where oversight comes into play. So we think an escrow company should have licensed professionals by way of an attorney and a CPA that have the oversight of their state authorities, and that also have their license on the line. These professionals have fiduciary responsibilities and have governing bodies that can monitor them. Extremely important. And we don't think you should work with an escrow company that doesn't have an attorney and a CPA. You need both of these for oversight and also from an expertise standpoint. I can't speak enough, and I will talk about this in a future webinar, podcast, or video or article, but the risk assessment insurance companies go through when issuing large bonds is absolutely thorough and critical. So insurance companies or bonding companies have one core expertise. It's evaluating risk. They take a risk and they make a small premium every year based on that risk. So when you have insurance companies or bonding companies evaluate an escrow company and take a meaningful evaluation of their processes, systems, team, and they're ultimately assessing is there a risk here of theft or error that's meaningful or not? And is that worth us putting our shareholders or our business at risk? And that's all they do. That's their job. That's their core business. So them going through that thorough evaluation of an escrow company and putting a sizable bond in place is an indication that they have the proper checks and balance system, team, and so forth in place. If that's not in place, they won't get approved for a large bond because it won't be a risk worth an insurance or bonding company taking. You also need internal and external audits and checks. So you need a separate internal team checking every account, doing the bank reconciliations at a separate system and checking everything. And you also need external accountants checking and auditing everything. Also, client oversight with transparency in the system is absolutely critical. Clients being notified and having real-time access to their accounts is really important because it creates a system to where transparency is there, and if there is an issue, it's going to get flagged immediately. Without these in place, the risk of working with an escrow company is too high. In respect of time, I'm going to briefly touch on SeedTrust. SeedTrust has multiple attorneys, all of which could be filed on, multiple CPAs, including our founding team on both of these sections. These professionals have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients. We have 8 in terms of the bond risk evaluation and underwriting, where they thoroughly underwrite the company to determine whether we're a meaningful risk. 8 insurance companies underwrite SeedTrust thoroughly, and they put their money where their mouth is and back SeedTrust with a $50 million bond. Meaning they've evaluated us, and trust me, it's painful. They evaluate us thoroughly, and they're comfortable with us at a $50 million level, which is extremely meaningful. We start to see that underwriting of an insurance company ramp up at $10 million. So we think an escrow company at a very minimum should have a $10 million bond, because that will protect them. That will ensure that they've gone through a thorough underwriting and analysis to ensure that they had the proper security measures and backgrounds in place. Again, SeedTrust has a 5-step process for every approval. That's audited by our team with daily bank reconciliations and our external CPAs to ensure everything is in line with what our system says and what we're promising. And everything at SeedTrust is fully transparent to our clients, which we take a lot of pride. And again, we are the innovator of this structure and many of these elements, and we're going to keep pushing this further and further because the industry deserves secure escrow. So I know I want to leave a little bit more time for questions, but just a few quick points. Escrow is often completely the last decision or last thing somebody's thinking about or overlooked when they're picking all their providers. It's kind of like a lot of decisions, nobody focuses on it until it becomes a topic. And when it becomes a topic, it's a big issue. So I hope that we exist to elevate what it means to be escrow and to protect everybody very thoughtfully. And we hope that the conversation today provided the necessary information to where everybody, feels comfortable with us and our processing systems, but also can push others to continue to step up their game to be more secure for their clients. And we're seeing others go down that path. So, but take your escrow selection serious. Security is just one part. The escrow companies are also integral throughout everything and are very closely involved to make sure things are paid on time and confusion calculations are explained and that stressful financial conversations between surrogates and parents don't have to happen because there's an intermediary. The role is critical and the right provider should be selected. The thought of that we keep hearing of people saying, well, we're going to self-fund or we're going to remove the escrow or that's the wrong solution. There are secure providers that have the proper expertise and systems in place to protect everybody. And the intended parents, surrogates, and donors should be focused on the beautiful thing they're doing to build a family and not financial conversations. And not, did my money arrive? Did the money go out? Is it included in the contract? Escrow is important and it's required in a lot of states for good reason. This is a lot of information. We are here for all of our clients and for the industry to answer any questions and to be there to guide. And we hope this was informative. We also plan to send a lot more information out through our social media on security, escrow, and so forth. So if you don't follow us and you use these social media platforms, I encourage you to. We hope to continue to share information. And that ends our prepared dialogue, and we have a few minutes for questions. Abby, did we get more questions? Abby, you're muted.
Gotta love that. So just any takeaways that you have for intended parents, even surrogates that are looking for escrow at this time, and what questions they should ask?
Yeah, look, again, my heart goes out to the people impacted by any bad escrow provider or any bad actor in our industry, period. I think when folks are selecting their providers or their partners or the people involved, they should evaluate whether they're qualified, experienced, have the proper structure and security in place. And when it comes to a financial company or an escrow company, you should pick one that has everything in place. No problem with smaller operators or other models, but they need to have these structure, bonding, everything in place so you can ensure that you're safe. You don't want to go to a boutique or one that doesn't have everything in place when it comes to a money management or financial company. It's not a place to compromise. The risk is too high.
Thank you. Well, I think as you mentioned, any additional questions that do come throughout the day, we'll be creating a Q&A that will be posted through our website and social media. But that's all I have for right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Abby. And again, we want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know this stuff can be thick and not very exciting, to be honest. But I hope the walkthrough today was helpful, and we'll be putting out a lot more information. Thank you for your trust and thank you for your time. And we are here if you have any further questions. Thank you.